So here's a bonus video for our midweek devotions, and it comes from a question that my wife asked. She said, "How would you explain Lent to a non-believer?" I didn't have much time to think about it then, but now I do now. There are denominations out there. There are people who don't celebrate Lent. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that we are built to observe seasons, right? There's this place in Genesis where it says that God put the moon and the stars and the sun up into the sky so that we could tell what season is supposed to be for planting, for taking food out of the garden, whatever it is. So we need to do that. There's the simple seasons of winter going into spring and spring into summer, and we see how the world changes. Well, we have to go through seasons too as a church. We go through a season called Lent, which means spring, by the way, and it's a time that we think about what Jesus did for us on the cross, how Jesus died for us to save us from our sin, how Jesus rose again to give us everlasting life. And then, of course, there's another major season, too. We have to think about the birth of Jesus Christ. And that season isn't as long as Lent, but we have to go through these things. We have to observe Christ's life and the life of the church. And we go from life to death to life again and all the ministry that we do. So that'd be one thing. Another thing that came to mind was that there's this number 40 that happens throughout the Bible. The 40 years that the Israelites were in the desert. And that was a very long time. If you think about it, it could have only taken them 2 weeks to get to the promised land. But it took them 40 years, and part of that 40 years was to train them, to go through that long season of learning who God is and learning to follow God in everything that they do. But then there are also the 40 days that Jesus was in the desert and how he was tempted by the devil. That's one of our devotionals that we are going through. So, we think of those numbers of 40. And so we go through a 40-day plus time of considering who we are. What is it like to have Christ in our lives? And what does it mean for Christ to forgive us of our sin? And maybe the last thing I would say, too, of all the things I could say, is that 40, think about what 40 is, 40 days. There are 365 days in the year. So 10% of that would be 36.5 days, right? So we are tithing our year to God by going through this time of Lent. We are asked to tithe our money, to give 10% of our money. And in the Old Testament, people were supposed to give 10% of their crops and things like that. But you know what? We're also supposed to give 10% of our time. And that's kind of cool to think about it that way, that we enter into the season of Lent and we're tithing our time. We're giving that. We're devoting that to our God. We are a little more serious about who we are. We're a little more serious about who God is. And we want to grow in faith. So those are a few things. Might not be everything that I could share, but a few things that I would say. Why it's so important for us to go through this time of Lent. And hopefully you have been going through well. Continue to grow in faith and in your love for Jesus Christ.